This is Black Social Capital. This is Black Social Capital.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Black Social Capital Podcast. I'm Dr. Jackie. I will get Dr. Theo on here real soon, but we are going to introduce our guest and kick this right on off. Today's guest is Kijaffa Hall. Kijaffa is a business and learning strategist by trade and a creative in her heart. After almost 2 decades in higher education leadership and organizational development, she founded KZ Hall Virtual Services to help small business owners shift their focus from task management toward developing and implementing strategies that feed a learning, growing, and creatively thinking organization. She also co founded the Boss Accountability Group, which is a support system for women solopreneurs, and is the host of Coffee and a Notepad, a podcast about business, entrepreneurship, and creating success on your own terms. Kijaffa holds a bachelor's in accounting, a master's in strategic management, and a graduate certification in learning design. She's a lover of all things media, and when she's not working, she is most happy creating memories with family and friends. Welcome, Kijaffa.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
Great.
Good.
I'm
Good to see
excited.
you.
I'm excited. It's been a long time coming. I've been watching. Look, you ever LinkedIn lurked and watch people do what they do? I'm like,
Yes,
ooh.
I'm good at lurking.
Look, they added something to the resume. I see you. But me personally, I love a good higher ed pivot, and I always like to see what people get into next.
Mhm.
Me and Kijaffa go way back to when we was young and trying to figure out this thing called life. So I'm glad that we're
Mhm.
able to reconnect today.
Yeah, it's so good to see you. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Of
I'm so
course.
excited.
All right. So I'm going to dive in with these questions. We want to know all about your educational path, how you chose the institutions you went to. We just mentioned in your bio your majors, but how did all of that come about?
um, mm, None of it, I will say, was immediately planned. So I grew up in Brooklyn, and I did not know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Never really had an idea of like, this is my career path, but I knew I wanted to go to college. So when I was in high school, and you meet with your advisors, you start picking schools, looking at criteria. Do you want to stay at home? Do you want to go away? I knew I wanted to go far enough away to not have my mother in my business in college, but I wanted to stay close enough so I could do laundry at home. And I had no idea what I was going to study. So I loved my dad so much. And I said, my dad is an accountant. Okay, so I'll also study accounting. And that was kind of how I got into undergrad. So I went to CUNY Baruch College in New York City, had a blast there, enjoyed all of the activities, joined a sorority, did not love my major, hated it for a lot of reasons. I realized I love math, but I didn't like accounting. Like, I realized I had a much more of a creative spirit, and accounting just wasn't it. So, but I had supportive friends and a mom who was like, we cannot pay for you to switch schools 3 years in. But they were very helpful in making sure that I graduated. When I got to graduation and everyone's like, okay, so now you have to look for a job. I don't want to be an accountant. I have no idea what I want to do. But I had an amazing advisor. And so I kept telling everybody, I want to be like Veronica. And so that is how I got into higher ed. I knew I wanted to be like my advisor. And I said, what is it that you do? You help students? Great. I'm going to look for something that works with helping students.
That's how they get you, boy. They be like, you a struggling student? You want to help other struggling students? And you be like, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it was very much like that most of my undergrad experience. Like because I wanted to be in clubs, she would be the one to be like, okay, you can run this club, but you have to have a certain GPA. So let's make sure that you meet that GPA. Okay, no problem. I can do that much, right? She's like, okay, in between breaks, nope, you're hanging out too much in the club room areas. I see you going to too many parties. Let me get you a job on campus. Like, okay, I can work in the office. I could do campus tours. I know the building clearly. I spent a lot of time hanging out on it. So if it wasn't for her kind of trying to keep me focused, and I didn't know that that's what she was doing at the time, but really trying to keep me focused, keep me in line, and just get out and get out of undergrad, graduate, you'll figure it out. And so at the end, all I knew is, well, she's the reason I made it to the end. Let me see if I can be the same thing. And that really became what I kind of kept as my guiding light as I grew in higher ed, right? Like I worked in a lot of urban spaces with students that looked very much like me, that came from circumstances similar to mine. And I said, you need to see yourself in order to know that you belong. And so I remembered, as hard as some of my roles became, I was a visual reminder that they belong there. And so I remembered, it's okay to be here. You do it because somebody else is looking to you that you don't even know. Veronica didn't know that she was my guiding light for years. And so, yes, so I got a degree in accounting that I never used.
Shout out to all them accountants out there. Hey.
Yeah. And while I was in higher ed, I had that I worked at Pace University, and I had an opportunity to go to school while I was there. I got my first managerial role, and I was like, okay, I don't know what managing looks like, so I'm gonna go back to school. And they were paying for it, and so I went back, got a degree in strategic management. And I realized that I loved it. It suited my brain. And I did that. While I was working in higher ed, I worked underneath a VP who was in IT. And so backstory. I got my job as a advisor in the registrar's office. So it was like registrar student services. So I was a student advisor there. The department went through an entire org shift. And so they brought in a guy who already worked at the college, but he was from the IT side of the house. And so he came in and had a technical brain, and he brought a lot of tech people with him to build up systems, to, update the technology, how we were doing all of our processes. And he brought me on. He gave me an option of 2 different roles that I could take, and I decided to take one that was still working with students. But I ended up doing a lot more technical stuff. So helping to learn how to develop SOPs, how to write technical training manuals, train the trainer kind of pieces. I had no language for what I was doing. I just knew that we had to figure this out, and I had a role. And yeah, so I worked underneath this guy for IT, and I realized as I'm still working in student services, even though I was working directly with students, I was more interested in like preparing staff for what they needed to do to support students, helping IT understand student service language. So, translating like this is how the student navigates, for instance, Banner. I don't know how many, if you're familiar with Banner, but navigating Banner or whatever student portal they're using. This is how students see it. Let me help IT create the reports that we need. Let us, what does the user interface look like to make
Come on,
students be able to
UX.
navigate? Huh?
Say, come on, UX.
I I know, but there was no language, right? I didn't know that these were roles, that these were actual jobs. What I knew is that my students needed something, and I had learned from my previous bosses what technical possibilities there were. And I was always just someone who was looking to solve a problem. So I was like, hey, I'll get in the middle, I'll help be the bridge. And this all led to me finding instructional design, learning design and technology, and kind of bridging that gap to all three. So none of my education choices were like conscious, I want to be this person. They were really just saying, I have to figure out what's going to work for me, and then using that knowledge to kind of keep pushing me forward in my journey. So yeah, it's been an
And
interesting road.
yeah, I think that's one of the more interesting things I've heard you say. Well, not interesting things I've heard you say, but like, I don't think we've had anyone on this podcast that said, I was in the middle of my college career when I realized that this is not where I wanted to be, but I went ahead and finished it because I stayed the course, right?
Mhm.
You're clearly not a quitter.
Yeah,
But and then you were true to yourself because I think a lot
yeah.
of people would have just gone, all right, well, I got this degree in accounting, so I have to go ahead and
Mhm.
work in accounting for at least a little while. But you stayed true to yourself, and
Yeah. I think it was more of I I I knew from the beginning it wasn't the world I wanted to be in, right? I like when when you're a business major, they want you to connect with like the Fortune 500 companies, right? So you go to all of these job fairs and you're talking to these, Chase, KPMG, and you're like, you have to dress a certain way. So I have to put on, the suit and tie, quote unquote. And
the
I was
uncomfortable clothes.
uncomfortable. Yeah, I was
Mhm.
uncomfortable because I felt like this isn't who I am. But what I did know I loved creating the fashion show. I loved, planning the events on campus. If there was like a conversation about organizing something, that's where I wanted to be. But I did not have the language to understand, this could be a career. What I knew was I already started this, and every advisor said, if you choose something else, you have another 2.5 years. And I was like, I don't have the money or the patience of a mama to be like, it's
Oh.
okay for you to extend that. um, and so I knew I didn't want to do something that I didn't even want to do in school. And so just like I chose my dad as kind of like, well, I love my dad and he's an accountant. I loved Veronica and everything that she did for me. And I said, well, let me follow her path and see what it leads me.
Okay. Well, let's talk about where that path led you because I want to get into these two businesses that you started. So, when did you start KZ Hall Virtual Services? When did you start Boss Accountability Group? And how did you know it was time to start both of those businesses?
Yeah. So, KZ Hall Virtual Services came out of necessity. The pandemic changed everything for everybody.
Okay.
And I was already feeling frustrated with my role. I was still working in higher ed. And I just felt like the leadership was not centering students' needs anymore. They weren't really interested in helping staff to do their best, right? And it becomes a very toxic kind of environment to work in. I think also just watching in the pandemic for me how students were struggling and there just seemed to be no systems to kind of support them. The interest in making sure that education was prioritized also kind of made me um, struggle with whether or not higher ed was still something that I wanted to be engaged with. Once again, I didn't choose higher ed because I loved it. I chose it because it represented something that I needed as a new person in their career. So I started to really think about, okay, if I chose a different path, what did that look like? So the pandemic changed a lot of things. And so I had a friend who started her own business. And during brunch, she said, hey, I need your help helping me, build the back end. I don't have the capacity anymore to do this by myself. She'd see me, work in other spaces, volunteering and just in my work at the college. And so I was like, okay, I'll do this part-time and see how it feels. And then that part-time became, I like this a whole lot more than what I'm doing. And so, for my own mental health, for me just feeling like I needed something different, I took a leap and I asked my husband for 6 months, give me 6 months to figure it out. He begrudgingly did so, and where are we sitting?
I can understand that. Yeah. Husband over there looking like,
yeah, I mean, those are hard conversations. Like we had literally just gotten married too, like 2019, October 2019, and then the pandemic hit 2020, and now I'm like, and I want to quit my job. Like, there's a lot happening here.
he like,
yeah, this wasn't the plan. Like, what's this switch up about?
Shout out to the husband.
So you got me on the hook with the oath and everything.
Yeah, I know. Like now I can't go back now. Like this is not the plan. But yeah, I asked him for 6 months and it's been 2.5 years. And so still working it out, still learning, still building, but I feel like I'm on the right path. I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. And so for once, I think I made a choice. I didn't just fall into this one, Mm. So yeah, and that was Kijaffa Hall Virtual Services. Mm-hmm. And so I focused a lot on working with small businesses, really helping them do what I was doing in higher ed, build those backends, document their processes, really think about what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and then what are the missing parts. And so helping them to fill those gaps, create space for them to think about it, which is really important because you don't always have the capital to just pay everybody to do everything. And sometimes you're stumbling through and you do need that support system to give you the space and grace to learn as you're building. And so I really do push for that and to think creatively. We are not Target or Walmart or, these industries that have been around for tens and tens of years. Like they have billions of dollars. You don't. So let's think creatively about how you can accomplish what you want and what you need to discipline yourself to do to get there. In my journey, my sister owns her own. She's an esthetician, so she's been in business for herself for about 5-6 years. So she was my support system as I was transitioning. And so we have what we call strategy meetings, where it can start out as like, hey, did you talk to mom? And then 2 hours later, we're like bouncing each ideas off of each other. Like, these are things I'm thinking about. What do you think is the right path? How should I do this? And we're like emailing each other resources. And we're meeting other women who are also trying to build for themselves. And so we decided together, let's create this accountability group where we kind of check in with each other, make sure you say you were going to run this program. What's going on? Like, I haven't seen the flyer. I haven't heard you mention it. Like, these are the things you say you wanted. So what do you need to do? Or if you're just starting, like, okay, I signed up for, this workshop. It's free. I'm going to send you the link so you can also go to it. Or, we'll review something for you, just so, because it's hard to do it by yourself. And so that was the impetus of the Boss Accountability Group, that we focus on building those systems and having a strategy for where you want to go, but also just being a safe space, if that's just a working session, and it's been amazing and a lot of fun. I
Look
hope
at siblings being useful.
Huh?
So look at siblings being useful.
I know. From, pillow fights and stealing each other's clothes to, to supporting each other. Yeah. And to have someone who champions you, I think for me, we've seen each other's journey getting here. We know what it took for us to get to these points. And it feels good to have somebody that can be honest with you, be like, I don't think that's a good idea. Right. Or when you're doubting yourself, for them to say, but I know what you're capable of. Because remember when you did X, Y, and Z, you said you couldn't do that, right? That's also really helpful. And just to have someone you trust that can give you that feedback. So we have a really good network of women who are also at different points of their own entrepreneurial journey. But we try to be the same thing, not only just a good sounding board, but also these are the things that we've learned. These are some of the techniques you should consider. Don't beat yourself up if you're not where you want to be. Just have a plan for how you're going to get there and stick to it.
I have a question about just not your virtual services per se, but like as you're working with new entrepreneurs, what are some of those things that you've seen in the folks that you've worked with that have been tough for them to like hurdle over, or things that they may or may not think about initially as they're launching a business, right?
Doing the boring stuff. That is the biggest hurdle. I love the dreaming. I love the vision. And then when you just get down to like the nitty gritty little things, like, okay, you want to, throw this event, you have to set up the event right. You have to set up the back end for sales. You need to, what is your email marketing going to look like? Where are you collecting information at? How are you going to follow up with them afterwards? How many people do you want? Do you have a list of all the things that you need to do? And so when you start to rattle off or help them align those things that are not as fun, that's when you can get some of the frustrations. And myself too, like, you get caught up in the excitement of doing things, and then we're like, I just don't want to draft this email. I don't want to design another flyer. I don't want to. And it can take the wind out of your sails, right? But that's the hard thing. And I think we do these things where we have like working sessions. We just jump on Zoom. You don't have to talk, but that somebody else is doing, that's a dedicated hour that I'm also doing work. Okay, you're there, then just do something, and sometimes that level of comfort is like, okay, I'll just bang this out. But that's the biggest thing, like the little things, the things that aren't glamorized, that no one gets to see.
It's those little checklist items that get you every time.
Oh my
God, that's a
God.
lot. I quit.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do it anymore. Bad idea.
One of the things that I think about too is, I know that you have a really big interest in like media and technology, and those are spaces that move really fast. So, one, what are some platforms or areas that you like to champion and suggest to folks? And then two, like, what would you say to someone that's nervous about how fast technology moves, and knowing like what platforms to use at all, platforms to
Mhm.
use at all.
Yeah. So I would say, so the two that I champion are YouTube and TikTok. I am a visual person. And I just believe that there's so much wealth of information that's available. First, before TikTok was a thing, on YouTube, people are sharing their experiences. You're getting demonstrations. So if technology is new to you, if you go on YouTube, someone's going to show you base. If I need to learn an Excel formula, how do I get these two cells to match? There's somebody on YouTube that took the time to demonstrate how to get those to match, right? And so you don't have to work hard. You just have to look for the information. And that's been a savior, right? Learning along with other IT people. And I remember one time I had to create an email in something similar to like MailChimp, like just one of those email platforms. And I was trying to get this image to look the way that it's supposed to. And every time I sent my test, it didn't work. And so they were like, "Oh, you have to write it in HTML." And I was like, "What is HTML?" I had never heard of this. And they were like, "Well, we don't have time," because they're working on other stuff. "We don't have time to teach you HTML." Cool. Went on YouTube to watch a bunch of videos. First, what is HTML? What does it do? How do I turn an image into, a banner for this? And there were demonstrations, and I wrote notes. And so, you know, teaching myself that was really helpful. So YouTube is a really big one, but definitely during the pandemic, TikTok was also very similar in that way. So when I was deciding on how I wanted to structure my business and what I wanted to focus on, I found individuals who were really big on using PowerPoint, but making the presentations more, Prezi like. And so they were doing all these demonstrations on there. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that this was a thing. Canva, all the tips and tricks that you can learn in Canva. There were people that were showing templates and stuff, how they were making them their own. And just people who were transitioning and using learning design, they talk about their experience. So now I'm picking up lingo, I'm picking up terminology that I didn't know there was a word for, right? Just like earlier where I was talking about like the user experience, I did not know that that was a thing. I knew that students needed the portal to look a certain way and they're looking for a particular button that didn't exist. I didn't know that that was UX design, right? But when you go on spaces like YouTube and TikTok where people are demonstrating things, you're picking up that language. So those are the two places I would say. And they're less intimidating because you don't have to interact with them. You can pin and save whatever you want. No one has to know what you were Googling, or on YouTube or TikTok. So those would be my top two platforms, and I still go to them and I still use them every day. Yeah, and there was a second part to that question.
Yeah. Oh, well, first off, I love the answer because I'm like, look, in 2023, 2024, 2025, like you can find anything that you need to know in a
Anything.
space because somebody's already been down that
Yes.
road, right?
Yes.
It's more about doing that mundane part, which is watching the video, which is taking the notes, which is testing it out, which is like,
Mhm.
oh, I thought my video was gonna turn out this way. I did it totally wrong. Now I gotta start again. Right? It's,
Mhm.
it's that portion that people will tend not to see. But
Yeah.
if you want the
But
information, it's there.
it's right there. And that made me remember what your question was, the patience with how fast technology moves. Um,
Mhm.
you don't have to know everything at once, right? And so the things that were in existence 20 years ago are still relevant. So wherever you are starting in learning new technology or adopting it in your practice, whatever you're using it for, it's okay to just know a little bit or just know enough, and you'll still have time to learn along the way. So don't get frustrated with there's something new that popped up and now I have to figure out something else. It's not going anywhere. And people are, for instance, if you love social media, you may be jumping on Threads, right? Because it's the newest and hottest thing now, but people are still using TikTok. I'm not TikTok, Facebook, right? They're still using Reddit. They're still using Pinterest. These are platforms that have been out for 10, 15 years. They didn't disappear. And you're still learning new ways to engage with them. So if you're learning a new software, it's okay. No, everyone still uses Word. Microsoft Word has been around for how many years, and we can all find a new feature that we did not know existed. So be patient with yourself, learn what you need to know for now, and enjoy the process of learning. My husband came home the other day. I was working, so I'm really big on crafting. And so I was like creating something that I wanted to create, designing something I wanted to create. And he comes and he says, "When did you become a graphic designer?" And I was like, I'm I'm not a graphic designer. I just realized that I learned how to use these. Someone asked me, "Can you create this?" And I said, "I don't know. Let me go into the software and try to put it together." And the more I clicked around, the more I saw what it did. Every day I tried something different. And it wasn't because I had to, it's because I loved it. Um, and that's how those skills build. There's always going to be new technology in that space too, but I am where I am, and it's fun to kind of figure it out, to put those pieces together and just practice.
Look, if you listening right now, you just gotta say to yourself, "I am where I am."
Yep.
Yes.
Like sometimes I'll be like, "I want to be over there. That looks fun
Yeah.
over there." I want to be
Yeah.
rich over there. No, you right here, right now. We still
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah. And I think that it's okay to like look at something else as aspirational, right? But not to use it to stifle yourself, because the bad thing about social media is that no one shows the struggle behind the scenes. Or even if they are showing that struggle, it's so curated for the fact that you want to feel approachable. No one sees when you're just like sitting in bed and just like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, right? I don't know how I'm going to figure this out. I really messed up that proposal. And like things happen and no one shows those real moments. You don't know what it took for someone to get there. And the more you start to talk to people, you realize that they have been working at this for 10, 15 years before you even knew their name. So, there are plenty of people that know your name now. 10, 15 years later, in the future, even more are going to know them. I did not expect for you guys to call and say like, "Hey, let's talk on this podcast," because it wasn't something I was top of brain, but because of my own personal journey to get here, that lends to that opportunity. And so you are where you are. Your journey is yours, even if it's similar to someone else's. And just be patient and have fun as much as possible in getting to that point.
I hope people are writing this down because I think that is the crux of so many people's issues, right? I'm thinking a lot about how Dr. Theo is a guru when it comes to Canva. And sometimes people will ask for things and I'll be talking to him. And he's like, "Wait, what? I don't do all of that over there. I do this," right? And people
Yes.
don't know the difference,
Yeah.
right? He's like, "Oh, well, I don't usually use like Adobe Photoshop," right?
Mhm.
And I'm just putting all your business out there. But he's
That's
like,
part
"I
of the
don't
show,
usually use
y'all.
Adobe. I use Canva." And people
Mhm.
are always amazed at what he
Yeah.
creates. And
Yeah.
it's just because he's been working on it for so long. He's so good at it.
And you don't realize like you could be building a talent that other people don't have, right? So like not everyone is going to be a master at everything. And you never know how your talent, someone's looking at you and being like, "How do you do that?" And you just think that, I don't know, I do this on my own. Like it just comes to me, and they're trying to emulate what you're doing. So I think, it's okay to have an example and put it up on your wall and say, "This is the person, this is the thing that I'm striving to get to." But I try really hard not to allow myself to get overwhelmed by where I see other people, because I also know how long it took me to get to this point. And I'm hoping that I've influenced someone else to make just a small step in some way. And so I just have to keep doing my best. And whatever's meant to be will come to fruition.
Mhm. Very, very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Um, Look, we would be remiss if we didn't give a shout out to your own podcast.
Mm,
You hopping out into new fields and things. You
I
joining us
know.
in the warm pool waters of podcasting. Tell us about your show.
Man, talk about a learning curve. Diving into the deep end. Coffee and a Notepad, where we talk about all things business, entrepreneurship, and creating success on your own terms. It is probably an extension of what my sister and I created out of the Boss Accountability Group, and my own the need for community. And so really just talking to other individuals about their own experiences, starting something new, making the decision to step out on their own, um, and going out to for drinks or brunch with other people who have their own businesses, and you're all asking the same questions or lamenting about social media or writing this grant or, like, whatever it is in your business. And it's just like, oh, there is a community. We're all dealing with the same thing. But if you're not talking to other people, you feel like, am I crazy to want to ask this question? Am I the only one that's thinking about this? And so Coffee and a Notepad is really just my way to have conversations that are not telling you how to run your business or how to become successful, but what does success look like for you? And what are the things that pop up that we don't often talk about when it comes to business, right? What is your experience with that? So I had the pleasure of talking to someone who just launched their business. So they were less than 30 days in. That learning experience is going to be very different than someone 5-6 years deep, right? Because you just
Was they
experienced
really
it.
excited and
They
they was
they
juiced
were
talking about how they was gonna change the world?
they were very excited that it was done, like it was out in the world, and they could say they launched it. So the pressure of that. But she talked a lot about the stumbling block. She got excited at one point, paid to have a website designed, and had no plan for what the business was actually going to do. So the loss of money, the investing in mentorship for her was a really big thing, where I was like, I had a great support system, so I didn't necessarily seek mentorship, and that's very different. And so just having that conversation, someone else may listen and say, oh, I was thinking about doing this. Maybe I should try, or this would be a good idea, right? My sister and I did an episode on the soft life. And, is that real for entrepreneurs? Because that's what you see on social media. Like, people are just living it up. They're traveling the world and not a care at all. And you're like, yeah, but I'm like knee deep in like writing stuff out and trying to network to get my next client. Like that's not my experience, right? I haven't hit that $1 million mark. So where are you guys traveling to Dubai every week? I don't know how that looks. But so we talked about that disconnect, that visual disconnect, and what the soft light could look like for you, like the things that you didn't have the freedom to do before because you were working a 9 to 5 or working in an environment that wasn't healthy for you. And so for me, it's like being able to make breakfast in the morning. Like, I don't have to leave at 6 a.m. to be in traffic. I can sit down and eat pancakes, like that's one of those luxuries that you don't think about, that you miss. And creating my own allowed me to make that part of my routine. So all that to say, that's what Coffee and a Notepad is. It's really bringing your cup of coffee, taking your notebook, and writing down these little tidbits that you can walk away and say, I am creating a life that works for me. And so I want to keep having those conversations and, building community around the idea of creating success on your own terms, in your own way, whatever that looks like.
I gotta ask,
Yeah.
how you take your coffee?
Oh, I'm a cream and sugar person. I do like a dark roast, but I love a little flavor cream and 2 Splendors every morning.
But I like mine intravenously, just straight to the vein.
No, it is an experience. I can't do overly sweet coffees. You know those people that show they putting all of this like milk and sugar and cream and flavor. I'm like, okay, so you're just drinking like caramel at this point. No, I need my caffeine kick. So that dark
Right.
roast is what does it for me. So
Dr.
yeah,
Jack, you got anything else for us?
I mean, no, because you actually answered that question too a little bit earlier. No, I'm looking at kind of my thoughts that I jotted down. You hit them all.
Oh, thank you.
Hey. So let's wrap like this. If there was one other thing that you could tell somebody that is pivoting into a new space or launching something new, what's that last little bit of encouragement or thought that you would give them?
Learn before you make any pivot, spend time investing in learning how to listen to your own voice. I think a lot of times I sought so many different opinions about what the right decision was going to be. And I had to learn how to sort through my own voice, like what is it that I am feeling? What is it that I need? What are the things that make sense? Not the doubts or the encouragement that other people were putting in. So really sit with yourself and be like, you can be the most honest with yourself because no one's asking you to share your thoughts with the world, but you have to be able to really listen to yourself. And if you're making a pivot, create a circle of support. You don't have to do this alone. It doesn't have to be your friends or your family if they don't, if you don't feel like they're your safe space. You can find community in colleagues. You can find community in other individuals who are in whatever new space you're going into. But know that you need someone that you can talk to, that you can share with, and so you're not holding everything to yourself, and you don't feel like you're alone. But definitely trust your own voice. That is something that I am consistently trying to build up. That I can feel all the things, and they are true. But it's my voice and it's my opinion that matters the most. It's not anyone else's. You can listen and you can take that advice, but really start to trust your own voice. And I think that has been the biggest lesson, because this is only going to grow because of my work, right? My thoughts, my feelings, my efforts. And so if I'm not in tune with myself, then it's not going to have any real direction. So that's really important. So I hope that is helpful to somebody.
Twas a word. Was a word. Look, this is exactly why we have all different journeys and all different stories on our show. Just because, we often say stay motivated and rise together, but that togetherness doesn't really start unless you trust yourself first. So definitely excited to have you point that out for the people.
Yeah.
It's been a great show. Thank you again for joining us. And as we always say, that's a wrap. We'll see y'all on the next one.
Bye, guys.
So much.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. Remember, the way we build social capital is to build self and build others. We are sure you got some notes on your tablet, computer, or even using a pen and paper. Leave us a review, continue the conversation on social media at Black Social Cap, and share the show with someone you know. Until the next episode, stay motivated, rise together.